Samuel 15. We're on part C of David study. So it's character study number 20, David, King of Israel, part C, the anointing of David. And it's out of 1 Samuel chapters 15 and 16. And I'm going to read a couple of verses, several verses actually, out of chapter 15. And so here is what it says in 1 Samuel 15, starting at verse 1. Then Samuel said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you as king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way while he was coming up from Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." Then Saul summoned the people and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. Saul came to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the valley. Saul said to the Canaanites, "Go, depart, go down from among the Amalekites, so that I do not destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the sons of Israel when they came up from Egypt." So the Canaanites departed from among the Amalekites. So Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as you go to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He captured Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were not willing to destroy them utterly, but everything despised and worthless, that they utterly destroyed. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, "I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not carried out my commands." And Samuel was distressed and cried out to the Lord all night. Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, and it was told Samuel, saying, "Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he has set up a monument for himself," then turned and proceeded on down to Gilgal. Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, "Blessed are you of the Lord. I have carried out the command of the Lord." But Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear?" Saul said, "They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but the rest we have utterly destroyed." Then Samuel said to Saul, "Wait, and let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night." And he said to him, "Speak." Samuel said, "Is it not true, though you were little in your own eyes, you were made the head of the tribes of Israel, and the Lord anointed you king over Israel, and the Lord sent you on a mission and said, 'Go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are exterminated'? Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord, but rushed upon the spoil and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord?" Then Saul said to Samuel, "I did obey the voice of the Lord, and went on the mission on which the Lord sent me, and have brought back Agag the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took some of the spoil, sheep and oxen, the choicest of the things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God at Gilgal." Samuel said, "Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and insubordination is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king." Well, quite an epic scene here. And we see Saul is thinking one thing, and Samuel is thinking something else entirely. So on our question sheet for tonight, question number 1, who did God say he wanted Saul to attack? The Amalekites. And for more on the background of this command, read Exodus 17. The Amalekites had attacked Israel unprovoked, no reason to do so. And God had said at that time, way back in the time of Moses, I want war on the Amalekites until they're gone. So I just answered that. How long did God say he wanted Israel to fight against the Amalekites? Until they're gone, right? You're welcome. How many of the enemy did Samuel command Saul to spare? None. None. Now, this obviously is one of those portions of the Old Testament that people who do not know the Lord, do not understand the Bible, they look at it and they say, this is horrible. This is like genocide. It is genocide. It is a command of God to wipe out an entire tribe. God never does anything frivolously. God never does anything capriciously. And there is a reason for this. We don't have all the information, but we do know that the Amalekites were a wicked, wicked pagan group of people who worshiped horrible gods. Many of the gods of the tribes that surrounded Israel, as you know, were demonic, were absolutely wretched, including child sacrifice and all sorts of heinous sins associated with their worship. And so the Amalekites deserved God's judgment, and the people of Israel were going to be the tool that God was going to use to punish them. And so the command was, wipe them out. Number two, what group of people did Saul warn to leave before the battle started? The Canaanites. Now this is really interesting, isn't it? And again, their history goes back to the time of Moses. Who do the Canaanites come from? Anybody catch that? No, good guess. Jethro. They're associated with Moses' father-in-law. And so the Canaanites they're not Hebrews, but they've been associated with the Hebrew people for the last 500 years. And now they've settled in some of the same territory where the Amalekites are living, and Saul warns them, you need to get out. You need to get away from there. So these people are descendants of Jethro. Number three, did Saul defeat the Amalekites? Yes. It was a great victory, and in fact, when it says things like they chased them as far from Havilah as you go to Shur, usually that indicates that the battle is what technically it's called a rout, R-O-U-T, rout. And what it means is an absolute defeat, to the point where the enemy combatants might be throwing their weapons away and running, getting out of there because they don't want any more part of this fighting. And so it would indicate that the Amalekites were thoroughly and completely defeated and being chased. Whom did Saul capture? Agag the king. Well, you can see we now have a bit of an issue, don't we? The command from Samuel was very clear, small and great, little and big, everybody. And now Saul is interpreting that command the way that he wants to. So he spares the king. What did Saul and the people spare besides Agag? The best of the sheep and the cattle. So they spared the very best. So sick animals, weak animals, motley animals, they're all killed. Animals that nobody would want anyways. But the best, they got saved. Number four, what did God say to Samuel? I regret that I have made Saul king. Now, does God make mistakes? No, he doesn't make mistakes. So what is this statement? God is a complete personality, right? He's not just the accumulation of laws of nature or forces of physics, or he's a person, right? So God has emotions. Can God regret something? Yes, he can. He can be sad. He can be sorry about something. That is what he's saying. He hasn't changed his mind. He hasn't changed his character. He hasn't changed his plan. But he is sad that Saul has turned into what he's turned into. And so I regret that I made Saul king. He has turned back from following me and has not carried out my commands. That's what God says about Saul. Number five, how did Samuel respond to this information? He is very distressed. He cried out to the Lord all night long. He stayed up all night praying and calling out to God. Why is that, do you think? Now we're speculating at this point because it doesn't say, but you can kind of read this whole sequence starting back several chapters when God said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people and do what they say, and here's what you're going to do. It looks like Samuel thought very fondly of Saul. Samuel really liked him. He was the guy that he anointed. And he was this tall, handsome, but really humble, kind of an introvert. And Samuel thought, he's a neat kid. And it's so neat to see what God is going to do. I think that Samuel really, really liked Saul. And now that he sees what is actually going on, Samuel is brokenhearted. He is devastated. He's seen somebody who could be a great leader, somebody who was humble, somebody who seemed to have some wisdom and godly good sense. And he says, this kid could do it. He could be a great king. And now, oh no. And it's coming to pass as Samuel thought it might. So, number 6, when Samuel went looking for Saul, where did he first go? Carmel. So, if you're thinking of the coastline of Israel, you kind of think of it, I'm going to do it backwards for you. Pastor Nate's really good at this. I have to flip my head around. Let's see, for you, it'd be over here. So here's the southern coastline of Israel, and it kind of curves over this way as Egypt. And then it curves and goes north, and there's not much by way of a natural harbor. There's a little bit, Joppa, Haifa, a little bit. But then you get up here, and about halfway up, or a little bit more than halfway, there's a little thumb that sticks out. Just a little thumb. And that thumb is a mountain. It's Mount Carmel. And that mountain is where Elijah had the great contest with all the prophets of Baal. Up on top, you can walk, you can climb it. It's I can't remember now, 3,500 feet. So the elevation is not stupendous, but you got to remember when you go down to the bottom, you're at sea level. So from the Mediterranean, you're going to go up, 3,500, 4,000 feet. And at the top, there are the remains of some fortifications and altars, probably not from Elijah's day, but from the top of that mountain, you can look all over northern Israel. You can see miles and miles and miles. And if you look the other way, if you look west, you can see the Mediterranean. Miles and miles of blue water. So it's a spectacular sight. So Saul went to Carmel, and Samuel goes there to find what's going on. And what did the people there tell him that Saul had done? He made a monument for himself. He made a monument for himself. Now, that actually is just one little phrase, but can you see there's now a change in Saul? What is it? He's now thinking, I'm the man. I am the man. I am pretty important. I'm the king, and I just won a great battle. We conquered this big tribe, and it was a total defeat. And we took their loot, and I am the man. And so in the mode of great ancient kings, emperors of Rome and pharaohs of Egypt, and the kings of Assyria and whatever, he gets a stone carver, and he says, I want you to carve me a giant plaque and say, King Saul conquered the Amalekites, and set it up where everybody can see it, because I am the king. What happened to the kid who was hiding by the baggage when they were saying, where's the king? Where's the one who is anointed? Oh, he's back with the luggage. Not anymore. Too bad, isn't it? Pride ruins more people probably than any other problem. and Saul has fallen prey to it. So he made himself a monument. Compare 15:12 with 10:22 and 11 and so on. And what attitude did Saul have when he was first anointed king? Humility. He didn't see himself as a great man. And what attitude does he seem to have now? Pride. Number 7, when Samuel met Saul at Gilgal, what did Saul claim to have done? I did everything. I carried out the command. Everything that God told me to do, I carried it all out. I executed fully. Now, it's not clear if Saul here actually believes what he's saying or if he's being deceptive. I think he actually believes it. Can a Christian get to the point where he is deceiving himself about what the issues are? Yes, that can happen. And so he says, no, we won, and we killed them all. And when Samuel says, well, I hear sheep, I hear cows, and who's that guy wearing the crown? Oh, wait, well, and now Saul is going to explain his logic and why he could interpret God's command any way he wanted to. But can you see his mind is shifted? He's not seeing reality. God says, kill them all, and he interprets that, well, that means if we see sick sheep and really gummy-looking cows, we'll kill them. But others that look pretty healthy, well, God, of course he doesn't mean kill them all. Well, that is exactly what God meant. So he claimed that he had carried out God's order. How did Samuel respond? Why do I hear sheep and cows, he says. And when pressed on the subject of disobedience, what did Saul claim in 15:21? So, here is one of the great techniques that the sin nature has invented. It's called passing the buck. It's not my fault. Somebody else. How far back does that go? Aaron did it. Go back farther. Adam and Eve. When God says, Adam, did you eat the fruit of the tree that I told you not to eat? And he says, that woman that you made. And of course, when God talks to Eve, she says, the serpent. We're really good at it. We pass the buck. Now, again, let me remind you that later on, when we're studying David, we're going to be studying David for a long time. We're going to get to the point where David himself is confronted with sin. And Nathan the prophet is going to come to him and tell the story about a rich guy and sheep and a poor guy and sheep. And the upshot is the rich guy steals the poor guy's one little lamb and kills it and cooks it for supper. And David, of course, is so angry. He says the guy who did that deserves to die. And he meant it. And Nathan, you remember, it's classic. Nathan said, you are the man. And now David gets it. He has so many wives and concubines. He's a king. He can have anything he wants. And he stole Bathsheba and killed Uriah. And it finally hits home after about 9 months. And he says, and this too is a classic, David responds to that confrontation by saying what? Do you remember? I have sinned against the Lord. Folks, keep it short and sweet. Keep it simple. When the Holy Spirit convicts us of sin, when he puts his finger on the sore spot and he says, you sinned. But the people, but that woman you made, but the snake. No. It was me, Lord. I did it. I sinned. And it goes so much better if we just acknowledge I am at fault. It is my problem. Nobody else did it for me. Nobody made me do it. It's not somebody else's issue. I made the decision and I sinned. That's called confession. That's called confession when we do that with the Lord. And that is what made David different from Saul. So Saul is the people. And then what else is he going to say? Well, he's going to say, but we saved the best for a sacrifice. More excuses. Number 8, what does God really want? Obedience. He really just wants us to do what he says. With a willing heart, he just wants us to obey him. How does he view disobedience? As a sin of witchcraft or divination. God takes a very dim view of anything to do with the occult, anything to do with witchcraft or sorcery. God doesn't like that at all. He hates that. But he says on the same level as divination or witchcraft is disobedience. Iniquity and idolatry. God says about rebellion and disobedience, it's the same thing to me. Number 9, how did Samuel feel about the whole situation with Saul? Grieved, just grieved. Here's another deterrent. When we're tempted by sin, when we're tempted to make a choice, a decision that we know is not right, think about the people that choice will affect. Sin always impacts others. It always has a harmful, negative impact on people around us. I've often thought in my own life, times when I'm out of sorts with the Lord, and it'd be nice to be able to blame that being angry with people or being short-tempered or not responding well. Oh, I've got a headache. Or I didn't sleep well, or any number of excuses. And sometimes those things might be true, but in my heart, I know the real reason. I'm not right with God. I have sinned and I haven't made it right, and that is impacting my horizontal relationships too. Well, here it is. Samuel is grieved. Number 10, to whom did God send Samuel in 16:1? Jesse. And where did Jesse live? Bethlehem. So now we're getting to familiar parts, aren't we? We know about Bethlehem. We know about Jesse. Was Saul eager to go? No. Why? Why was Saul not eager to go? He thought that Saul might kill him. Now, that right there says something pretty heavy duty about the state of Saul's mind. What does it indicate about where Saul's head is going? Dark places and not the same person. He's getting all twisted up in his head. He's getting pretty messed up. And it's a foreshadowing of what's going to be happening in chapters yet to come, where the one person who is actually the most helpful to Saul is going to be David. The one person who plays his harp and Saul feels better and he calms down, that's David. And David is so loyal to Saul. But Saul eventually gets in his head that David is trying to undermine him. David is working behind his back to steal the kingdom. Nothing could be further from the truth. But it shows you what sin can do to someone's mind. So Samuel was not eager to go. That should say Samuel there. Was not eager to go to Bethlehem because he thought Saul might kill him. Number 11, why would the elders of Bethlehem tremble in 16:4? Yeah, so the coming of the prophet could be associated with you people are in trouble. You know, it's possible that the man of God coming to your village to have a chat is good news but it could be something else. And that's why they're a little trembly about this. Number 12, what did Samuel think when he saw Eliab, Jesse's oldest son? This guy is awesome. Now remember, his point of comparison is Saul, and what is Saul like? Handsome and very tall, head and shoulders taller than anybody else. So when he sees Eliab, he says, wow, that guy is photogenic. We should do an interview with him, get him on CNN, because he is so handsome, he looks good. Apparently, he had these sorts of qualities, handsome and tall, out of 16:7. But God is primarily interested in what? The heart. The heart. External things do matter some, but internal matters so much more. The spirit, the soul, the heart, the devotion to God, the direction of life, the character, that is what God is most interested in. Number 13, how many sons of Jesse were brought before Samuel in 16:10? 7. 7 boys. They all come in and shake the prophet's hand. And who do they wait for before they began the meal? The 8th one, the shepherd boy. And the youngest is out in the fields keeping watch on the flocks. That's his job. And he wouldn't normally be called in for a family meal because he's got to keep track of the sheep. He's the youngest, lowest in the pecking order. Now, does this sound familiar? The youngest, the little guy. How far back can we take this? Jacob and Esau, Joseph, the young Isaac and Ishmael, and it's the younger. And the culture of the day is normally the eldest, the firstborn, the most important, the most significant. But God is demonstrating that he doesn't have to follow our rules or our expectations. He can do anything he wants. And so he has chosen the youngest of 8 boys, the shepherd, to be the next king of Israel. So number 14, what happened to David when he was anointed? Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. Now remember that there is a difference between Old Testament and New Testament in this regard. In the Old Testament, the Spirit of God came upon people, but then he could also leave, and he did. And actually Saul is going to be a case of that too, where the Spirit of God can come upon for special strengthening and power, but then he can also leave and go away. In the New Testament, the Lord Jesus taught us that the Spirit of God, once he indwells a person, never leaves. So that's one of the huge differences between Old Testament believers and New Testament. We have the permanent indwelling Spirit of God. So the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. Number 15, the evil spirit from the Lord means a spirit of catastrophe, downfall, or destruction. So an evil spirit from the Lord comes to Saul. And this is because Saul has disobeyed God several times now. He's not listening, he's not confessing, he's not repenting. And God says, okay, if you're running straight towards a brick wall, I'm going to help you hit it. There's going to be a catastrophe. And that's what's going to happen. So I just answered the second part of number 15. You're welcome. Yeah, no problem. One of the services I provide. Number 16, what did Saul's advisors think would help him? Yeah, music. And it's not 100% clear if this is merely emotional. It seems to be more than emotional, because it does say that as David played the harp, that the evil spirit, the spirit of catastrophe, would leave him, and he was refreshed. He was made well. So this position was recommended to be filled by David because he's a skillful harp player. And number 17, how did Saul respond to David in 16:21? Loved him greatly, made him his armor bearer. So what's an armor bearer? Well, you help, especially with a shield, because in those days, what would armor look like? It's heavy and big. It's probably not plate armor. When we think armor, we often think medieval Europe, the big sheets of steel. That's not what this is. This is probably bronze scale armor. So it's individual plates, kind of oval shaped or fish scale shaped, and they're stitched. They have a couple of holes punched into them, and they're stitched onto a leather shirt that goes underneath. And they overlap, so it's really like fish scales. And the whole apparatus, it wraps around. It could go down partway on your arms, or it might go all the way down. But the whole shirt would hang down to your knees, and it would probably weigh 20 or 25 pounds. So Saul's got that on. He may be, not clear, but he might have had greaves. Do you know what greaves are? Shin guards. So think a baseball catcher, and he's got the leg protectors, shin protectors. These are made out of bronze, and they would go over his legs. And then he would have a sword. He would likely have a bronze-headed spear. He might have more than one. David, as his armor bearer, would likely help carry his shield. He would have a shield. If this were Philistine style, it'd be kind of hourglass shaped and be about yay high. And it would be cowhide stretched on a wooden frame, possibly with metal edging. And so it could have been round, but it was probably kind of an hourglass shape. And then David might also carry extra spears for him. And so he would accompany him into battle. And if Saul needed another spear, the armor bearer would also function a little bit like a wingman in fighter pilot. So, if he sees somebody coming from this side, the armor bearer turns to meet him and lets the boss know, we got somebody coming in from our 6 o'clock, and so on. So the armor bearer accompanies him into battle. So he loved him, he made him his armor bearer, and I think that was a real love. I think that Saul really did see great qualities in David. David was very loyal. David was athletic. David was devoted. He was a hard worker. And so Saul saw those qualities and loved him. Number 18, what effect did David's harp playing have on Saul? Refreshed, made him well, the spirit of catastrophe would leave him. Okay. Questions or comments on our study so far? Please take your prayer bulletins